Hello to you all. We are delighted you can join us today for the CaRMS Forum. This is being recorded and the video will be posted on our website and YouTube channel in the coming days. I acknowledge Canada as the land of the First Nations, Inuit and Métis. I acknowledge the CaRMS office, located in Ottawa, stands on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin people. I pay homage to the Indigenous peoples past, present, and future from all nations across Canada who contribute to the strength of this country. We are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, and learn in this place. Every year, CaRMS residency matches bring together thousands of applicants and programs looking for their best possible outcome. Our role in administering these matches is to deliver a national service that reflects policies as determined by faculties and provinces and respects the autonomy of local decision makers, to fairly balance the priorities and concerns of learners and faculties, to ensure the integrity and safety of the match process for everyone involved, and to do all of this while making it as simple as possible for applicants and programs to find one another. Our job in this process is to make it as easy as possible for match participants to achieve success. And we do this in partnership with our clients and stakeholders. We're grateful for these collaborative relationships, and we look forward to continuing to work together to ensure the success of the system and its participants. The match data that we will be sharing today is one of the ways CaRMS can contribute to this success. You'll be seeing a lot of numbers throughout this presentation. But it's important for us to remember that these numbers represent people, and the story they tell can shed light on what is happening in the match system. At its heart, it is a story about the decisions match participants make and the outcomes of those decisions. The data from today's presentation will be posted on carms.ca after the event, and we will be sharing even more detailed data on our website in a couple of weeks once we've had time to analyze it and package it for release. Our priority for today's presentation is to address the high-level story of the 2023 R1 match. A lot of the topics you'll see listed here are what we've all seen getting attention in the news over the last several months in relation to our healthcare system and are often top of mind in the conversations we are having in our own lives. We will begin with a match overview. We will focus attention on our international medical graduate applicants. We will share data from the CaRMS self-identification questionnaire in relation to the diversity of the applicant pool. We will focus specifically on family medicine as a discipline and explore the Unmatched Canadian Medical Graduate, and finally summarize with key takeaways. We're hopeful that the data we share today on these and other topics and the more detailed data to follow later this month will provide valuable insights to inform decision-making in our community. Before we dive into the data, I'd like to introduce my colleague, Ryan Kelly, to give a brief overview of how you can ask questions throughout the presentation. Over to you, Ryan.
Thanks, John, and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. As mentioned, I'd like to go over some housekeeping items before we get started with the match data. Throughout the presentation, there'll be several opportunities where John will be responding to questions submitted by the audience. On the right side of your screen, there's a questions tab. Feel free to ask a question at any time. You don't need to wait for the designated question periods. There's also an upvote function available for each question that has already been submitted. If you see that someone has already asked something you are interested in, please use the upvote function that is located on the left side of each question rather than resubmitting it. If your question is specific to a slide that John has presented, try your best to include the slide number in your submission so John can reference the slide when responding. If you prefer to ask your question in French, we have a translator monitoring the question section who will reply in French and translate for the rest of the audience as well. We will do our best to answer as many questions as we can today, but we may not be able to get to everything. Feel free to also use the questions tab to leave comments about today's presentation. The CaRMS Forum deck will be posted on carms.ca after today's event. All registrants will receive an email with a link to the post. That's all for me. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Ryan. Let's get right into the R1 match overview. We'll begin with an overview of those interested in a residency position in Canada. Here we show the two main cohorts: international medical graduates, those graduating from a school that is listed in the World Directory of Medical Schools, and Canadian medical graduates, those graduating from a CARMS accredited school. We specifically identify US medical graduates where we know there is particular interest in that cohort. In any match, applicants begin by registering. They become active applicants by applying to at least one program. Final participants are those who submit a rank order list. 5,244 applicants registered, with 4,564 participating in the match by submitting a rank order list. Here are the 2023 R1 match highlights, 2 iterations of the match. First iteration data on top, with the applicant perspective in the table and information on position availability filled and unfilled in pie charts on the right. There were 3,532 positions available. That compares to 3,410 in 2022. In the full cycle of the R1 match, both first and second iterations, 3,422 positions were filled, leaving 110 unfilled, 100 of which were in family medicine. There were 115 unfilled positions in 2022. In the end, 127 more positions were filled in 2023 as compared to last year. Of the 2,992 CMGs who submitted a rank order list, 2,850 matched. That includes 2,743 current and previous year graduates without postgraduate training in the first iteration, and in the second iteration, 87 current and previous year graduates matched, in addition to 20 who were matched with prior postgraduate training. 1,550 IMGs participated in one or both iterations, with 550 matching. That is a comparison to 439 in 2022. And finally, 17 USMGs matched of the 22 who participated. Those of you quick to do the math will note there is a gap between the number of current year CMGs unmatched in first iteration and the sum of the matched and unmatched in second iteration. The difference is those who chose not to participate in second iteration after not matching in first. Here we have a summary of the R1 match after both iterations, reflecting those who will be entering residency training on July 1st of this year. In total, 3,422 positions filled, 127 more than 2022. 555 by IMGs, 422 in the first iteration, and 133 in the second. 90 by previous year CMGs, 2,760 by current year CMGs, and 17 United States medical graduates. 3,422 is the most positions filled in at least the last 10 years. Similarly, 555 is the most IMGs entering into residency training since at least 2014. This is a view of the available positions and participants for first iteration. Columns showing available positions, blue for Canadian medical graduates. Of note, this includes positions in Quebec, where positions are available to both CMGs and eligible IMGs. Burgundy is for IMG quota, and the lines representing participation. Again, blue for CMGs and burgundy for IMGs. You can see the CMG participation rate is quite consistent, while IMG participation dropped in 2020 and showed a slight increase this year. The increase in positions in 2023 includes innovations in different jurisdictions that seem to have had the desired effect with attracting applicants to programs. This data is specific to CMG participants and quota. Quota is the burgundy line above the bar. The blue portion of the bar is current year Canadian medical graduate participation. Green is prior year. And the orange circle contains the ratio of available positions to total CMG participation. Given the quota available to CMGs and the number of participants, the ratio of quota to participants for 2023, is now 1.08. That ratio has been increasing since 2018. Quota is up 186 from 2014, or 6.3%. In that same period, CMG participation increased from 2,847 to 2,937, 3.5%. This is a good place to point out that this and many of the subsequent slides are for first iteration. You will see that clearly labeled in the lower right-hand corner. Let's break down the available positions for CMGs. These are discipline groupings you will see used frequently. Due to their size, family medicine and internal medicine are shown separately. Surgical disciplines include cardiac, orthopedic, vascular, plastic, general or neurosurgery, obstetrics gynecology, ophthalmology, otolaryngology, and urology. Non-surgical disciplines include pediatrics, emergency medicine, psychiatry, anesthesiology, dermatology, neurology, diagnostic radiology, and radiation oncology, as well as all laboratory medicine disciplines. There has been an increase from 3,075 in 2022 to 3,158, a 2.6% increase. That increase is across all discipline groupings. We have seen position availability, and we now will look at applications, which is, of course, the first step for applicants to express their interest in a particular program. Here we see two application-related measures. One, focused on applications to individual training sites. The ability to apply to an individual training site gives applicants choice as to exactly where they would like to train. That is the vertical columns. Blue for family medicine, and burgundy for all other disciplines. You see a sharp contrast here, which is reflective of the large number of training sites for family medicine in many, if not all, faculties. The lines represent the number of distinct programs to which applicants apply. For example, pediatrics at Dalhousie, emergency medicine at Manitoba, or family medicine at Queen's. Again, for family medicine and some other programs, there may be multiple training sites. You can see that family medicine applicants apply on average to just over 5 programs or schools, while those applying outside of family medicine, the average is closer to 10. Thinking now of the decision flow, we have applicants who have chosen the programs where they would like to apply. Programs then decide the applicants they would like to meet for interviews. This is a view for the last 4 years of the percentage of applicants receiving at least one interview offer broken down by a number of cohorts. You can see with certain cohorts, for example, current year Canadian medical graduates, almost all members receive at least one interview offer, while for the others, the percentage is much lower. Take into account that for some cohorts, the population size is fairly small, which can result in somewhat dramatic shifts year over year. One notable trend is the increase for 2022 and 2023 in the percentage of IMG applicants receiving interview offers, current year and previous year. This correlates to the marked increase in the number of matched IMG applicants, the highest number of matched IMGs in 2023 for at least the last 10 years. With the same interview offer data, we can look at the percentage of CMG applications that led to interview offers. Here, we see the percentage of applications to the CMG applicant's home school that led to interview offers, and that same view for applications to away schools. 2022 and 2023 interview offer percentages nationally are for CMGs is virtually identical. After interviews, both programs and applicants start to think about the biggest factor of all, ranking. An important feature of our Canadian system is that it is safe for all participants to reflect their true preferences in their rank order lists, knowing that by listing their true preferences, they put themselves in the best position to realize their desired outcomes. If you have any questions about that, I encourage you to go to carms.ca and look for how it works, the match algorithm. Here we look at the first choice disciplines for Canadian medical school graduates. That is, the discipline reflected in the #1 rank on their rank order list. Family medicine is in blue, internal medicine in green, surgical burgundy, and non-surgical orange. A couple of things to point out. One is a continued increase in interest for non-surgical programs. Anesthesiology and diagnostic radiology are two specific disciplines attracting greater interest. Internal medicine had a decline this year, while interest in family medicine declined slightly from 2022. Given the many conversations on the importance of primary care in the Canadian healthcare system and the challenge for many Canadians in having access to a primary care physician, later in the presentation, we will be shedding more light on family medicine in the context of the application, selection, and match process. Here we bring together two essential elements: supply, as measured by available quota, and demand, as measured by, in this case, Canadian medical school graduates, applicants with the discipline as their first choice. The lines represent the ratios of quota to CMG applicants with that discipline or discipline grouping as first choice. Upward slope indicates increasing supply versus demand. Downward indicates increasing demand versus supply. Using non-surgical as an example, you will see a downward trend, therefore more demand versus supply. In 2014, there were 92 positions available nationally for every 100 CMG applicants ranking non-surgical disciplines as first choice. Now, in 2023, that ratio is 82 to 100. Contrast with family medicine, where we know there have been significant increases in the availability of family medicine positions with a decline in first choice interest. It is important to highlight that this is first iteration data. The second iteration introduces many other variables. This analysis shows the percentage of applicants included on both the included on both the CMG applicant and program rank order list, with views of applications to home and away schools. The blue bar is a national view, and each of the 4 lines represents a region. In 2023 nationally, 78% of all CMG applications to their home school resulted in both the applicant and program ranking one another. For applications to away schools, that number is 60%, a slight decline in both categories from 2022. You can see a general upward trend of likelihood of mutual ranking for the 4 years starting in 2018, with regional variation over those years. 2022 began a decline in home mutual rankings below the 2020-21 peaks, with away mutual rankings just below last year's. Quebec saw the most significant reductions in home and away school mutual rankings for 2022 and 23 from the 2021 peak. This is one of our standard outcome measures: percentage of Canadian medical graduates matched to a first choice discipline. You'll see our 4 familiar discipline groupings with the percentage of CMG applicants ranking one of these disciplines or discipline within one of the discipline groupings as their first choice who match to that discipline. I expect there isn't much surprise with these outcomes, given the supply-demand trends we saw previously. 99% or more of CMGs who ranked family medicine as first choice matched to family medicine since 2013. With percentage of applicants choosing internal medicine as first choice, matching to internal medicine mapping the demand versus supply trend we saw earlier. Matching to surgical and non-surgical disciplines as first choice, also generally tracking the supply-demand curve for those discipline groupings. In practical terms, what this means is that in the aggregate, more applicants are pursuing disciplines with more demand than supply, creating, at least for those disciplines, tighter competition. However, applicants are also broadening their interests, including more disciplines in their rank order lists. This is why we see a fairly consistent match rate among CMGs. Remember what I said earlier, it is safe to express true preferences while also including all training opportunities of interest in an applicant's rank order list. Here's a view of that same measure nationally and by region. nationally a very consistent outcome along this measure over the past 5 years. This is mirrored generally across regions, albeit with yearly variation. Up to now, we have focused on position availability and interest for the first iteration. This is an important lens as it speaks to trends across a number of dimensions. We also know that the second iteration is an essential component where both programs and applicants can adjust based on what they know from first iteration activity. Here we see the composition of matched applicants in second iteration for the past 5 years. The most striking element is the number of IMGs matched in second iteration for 2023. Not surprisingly, given the number of available family medicine positions, the majority of matched applicants did indeed match to family medicine, which we will see on the next slide. That being said, applicants matched to 17 different disciplines in the second iteration. Here is the view of positions filled in the second iteration of the 2023 match, broken down by applicant cohort and discipline category. Of the 241 positions filled, 164 were in family medicine, 21 in internal medicine, 51 in non-surgical disciplines, and 1 in a surgical discipline. Second iteration also offers the opportunity for those with prior postgraduate training to pursue opportunities. This is sometimes referred to as transfers, although this can include applicants not currently in training. This is a 7-year aggregate view of the movement of these applicants within and between disciplines. As you can see, family medicine attracts many applicants from other disciplines, as you can see in the chart. You also see family medicine trainees going to other disciplines and changing location within the discipline. At the end of the second iteration, there were 110 unfilled positions. Here is a 5-year view of unfilled positions broken down by discipline category. 100 in family medicine, 9 in non-surgical disciplines, 1 in a surgical discipline, and 0 in internal medicine unfilled after second iteration. Now is a good opportunity to pause for questions. Over to you, Ryan.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And the question section is quite busy today, so we'll start with this first one. So regarding slide 12, the slide shows an improvement in the quota to applicant ratio, yet we are seeing an increased number of unmatched students. Are there thoughts on why this is happening? Are the French language spots or other unique spots skewing some of this data?
Certainly, the increase in Quebec is part of that quota. There's no doubt about that. As I mentioned earlier, the alignment of interest and availability is often underlying, where that unmatched situation lines up with unfilled positions and the increase in quota. So those both things can be true at the same time, and you do have to break it down further in order to uncover exactly where those misalignments are.
The next question. The number of IMGs matched in 2023 has increased to 555 from 439 in 2022. Why has there been such an increase?
The why behind that in many respects is, of course, a story of selection. But I will say that in some provinces, the change in eligibility in the second iteration, where streams that were previously limited to Canadian medical graduates were made available to international medical graduates, is a factor, no doubt about that. And there were, as I mentioned earlier, some innovative practices in certain jurisdictions where quota was made available to international medical graduates in the first iteration. So there are a number of factors at play here. And the one common factor, however, over the years is the availability and interest of international medical graduates. So the availability of that pool of qualified candidates has been a constant, and now we're seeing those opportunities being taken up and success being achieved by those IMGs.
Next question. Will there be a report on the reason for failure to match in both iterations? For example, insufficient ranks by a candidate, candidate could have matched but not ranked by program, candidate rank list ran out without any match, etc., etc.
Somebody may have had early access to this presentation, so the answer to that is yes. We have quite a bit of information on that, and we will be sharing that later on in the presentation. So thanks for that question.
Perfect. And that's actually a great point, that some of these questions I'll be holding off on for now, as John's going to get to them in the subsequent sections, and we'll be able to bring them up to the stage at that time. So looking at the graph on slide 17 that shows for 2023, 30.3% of applicants had family medicine as their first ranked choice. Does this reflect that a large percentage of CMGs who matched to family had another discipline as their first choice?
Once again, a prescient question. The answer to that is coming in a future slide, but the answer to the question is yes. Many who rank family medicine, but not as a first choice, do ultimately match to family medicine. So we'll provide quite a bit more data on that in not very far down the presentation.
With an increase in unmatched positions, has there ever been a consideration for a third iteration of the match?
Not in my experience. There haven't. When we look at the data, those who decide to pursue something different in second iteration usually will have done so, and a third iteration may or may not change what those choices are. It's an interesting question, and perhaps something that we'll talk a bit more about.
Perfect. I think that's all the time we have for questions this round, but we'll get to more once we get to the next question session. Back to you.
Super. Thanks, Ryan. Okay, the following section provides some analysis for our international medical graduate applicant group. This analysis shows the number and percent matched for IMG based on number of years participation. Note the general upward trend of match percentages for all groupings. In 2023, 349 IMGs matched in their first attempt, compared to 264 in 2022, 150 for those in their second or third match, and 56 for those with more than 3 years of participation. Once again, an increase from 2022 and 2021. This view breaks down 2023 IMG applicants by year of graduation, with final participants in burgundy and the blue indicating matched participants and the percent match rate in the green line. The far right-hand side reflects those graduating in 2023. 80% of current year graduates matched, 115 of 144 participants. 66% of last year's graduates matched, 57 out of 86. 50% of those who graduated 2 years ago, 49% of those graduating 3 years ago, and 26%, 300 participants matching who have graduated more than 3 years ago. Here we see match results by geographic region for the past 5 years, combined first and second iterations. All regions show an increase in the number of participants. 6 of 8 regions saw an increase in percentage of participants matching, while all regions saw an increase in matched participants. Now moving to an exploration of diversity data as gathered through the CaRMS Self-Identification Questionnaire. The CaRMS Self-Identification Questionnaire, or CSIQ, came about as a result of the community's awareness of significant gaps in understanding about the diversity of the residency applicant pool. Learner organizations were vocal about the need for census-level diversity data to inform decisions and encourage progress. Postgraduate deans expressed a strong desire to obtain reliable and comprehensive national diversity data to guide decision-making. Additionally, program director leadership approached CaRMS with a request to collaborate on ways to facilitate the collection and use of diversity data for program selection purposes. CaRMS was identified as a natural organization to carry out that work due to our history of responsible data stewardship, as well as our ability to make important connections between diversity data and the existing application selection and match data we provide. The 2023 R1 match is the second year the CSIQ has been in use. The data we are showing you today represents early progress on the path to understanding current match processes and outcomes in relation to equity, diversity, and inclusion. The CSIQ was developed with two specific goals in mind. One, to gather census-level diversity data, and two, to provide applicants with an optional, safe, and supported means to share self-identification information with programs who have introduced a diversity consideration into their selection process. Today, we will be sharing data regarding the first of these goals, global data collection. Before we jump into the data, I want to share a little bit about how the CSIQ was developed. CaRMS consulted our clients and the experts at the Canadian Centre for Diversity and Inclusion, as well as a stakeholder working group with representation from organizations shown here. We continue to solicit and be open to input from the community as we focus on evolving the CSIQ to meet the community's needs and reflect emerging best and promising practices. Many individuals have made important contributions to progress in this work. I do want to specifically recognize two colleagues, Dr. Ian Epstein and Ms. Santana Hernandez, as early champions and who continue to be catalysts and leaders. We have had huge growth in response rates since last year, which was the introduction of the CSIQ in the R1 match, bringing us a step closer to being able to draw meaningful inferences. Last year's global response rate was just under 19%. This year's response rate is close to 60%. And you can see response rates by each applicant cohort in the first chart on this slide. For example, 57.2% of the CMG applicant group responded, 63% of the IMG group, and almost 49% of the United States Medical Graduate group. The second chart is a different view of respondents. It shows the proportions of total CSIQ respondents who belong to each applicant cohort. For example, 42.5% of all respondents were international medical graduates. This and the next two slides show aggregate data for the response to 6 questions. I do want to make specific mention that CaRMS is aware of concerns around the issue of Indigenous self-identification within the medical education community and Canada at large. As we work with stakeholders to evolve the CSIQ to meet the needs of the community, CaRMS is committed to ongoing consultation with Indigenous stakeholders to ensure the application of best practices regarding Indigenous identification. Responses to these 2 questions: do you consider yourself to be an Indigenous person? Here we see the response rate. Responses, 96.4% indicated they did not consider themselves to be an Indigenous person, with 2.6% responding yes. Do you consider yourself to be a racialized person? 55.9% indicating yes, 41.9% indicating no, with a group that preferred not to apply, which is an option for every one of the questions in the CSIQ. And here are responses to the questions: were you or the people who raised you born outside of Canada? In this case, 71.7% responded yes. And do you consider yourself a person with a visible or invisible disability? 5.1% responded yes, with again the option to not reply, 2.2%. The final 2 questions: do you consider yourself a person of a minority sexual orientation and/or gender identity? 86% responded no, 10.4 yes, 3.6 preferred not to apply. And the response to the question indicate your approximate household income when you were a teenager. Here, I'll just explain a little bit the percentages. These are percentages based on of the total respondent group. So the percentages for CMGs would add up to 56.9%, reflecting the CMG group of the total, and IMGs 42.5%, and then USMG's 0.6%, so quite a small portion. So you'll see that is how the data is presented here. It'll take you, I'm sure, a minute or two to orient yourself, and you'll be able to do that at your leisure. Now turning to a focus on family medicine. As mentioned earlier, we are mindful of the important conversations occurring concerning family medicine as a discipline within the application, selection, and match system. Due to the number of positions available and the number of applicants who apply to, rank, and match to family medicine, there is much to explore. Let's first review the opportunities. In 2019, there were 1,552 available positions. In 2023, there were 1,629. That's an increase of 77 or 5% over 5 years. This slide provides some context for our view of family medicine. We can see quota increasing this year. In fact, for the last few years, the number of distinct applicants has declined. And I mentioned earlier the number of training sites available in family medicine. So you'll see across the country there are 150 different family medicine training sites, indicating that this is very much a community-based residency training program. And you'll see that if you do look at our program description page on CaRMS.ca, you'll see the many programs available and covering many communities across the country. It is important to note that along with first choice discipline, applications and ranking are important indicators of interest. 74% of all R1 applicants this year applied to family medicine in 2023, 78% in 2022. This table is a busy one, so we'll take a few moments here. This table shows data for the last 5 years for all applicants ranking family medicine along with the matched and unmatched outcomes. Again, this is for the first iteration. In 2023, 2,980 applicants ranked family medicine. This is ranked at any place on a rank order list. That is 72% of all applicant participants in the R1 match. In 2019, that number was 2,989, which is 76.7% of the R1 applicant pool. So we have seen a decline in both absolute numbers and in percentage of applicants ranking family medicine since 2019. I can tell you that that is true, and if you do the math, you'll be able to see it. When you look at the two largest groups separately, 74% of CMG participants ranked family medicine in 2019, and that number is now 65% in 2023. This lines up with the reduction in absolute numbers from 2,162 to 1,911. As we know, that CMG participant numbers have been fairly consistent over those years. With IMGs, those numbers are 83% in 2019 and 88% in 2023. So while the percentage of IMGs ranking has increased, the absolute numbers have decreased due to a decline in IMG participants. Those CMGs, and this is reference to the question earlier, those CMGs who apply to and rank family medicine frequently apply to and rank other disciplines. That is not surprising, given the strong tendency for CMGs generally to apply to and rank more than one discipline. It is, however, more often the case for those choosing a high-demand discipline to apply to and rank multiple disciplines versus those who choose family medicine as first choice. This is a breakdown of those disciplines where those CMGs who ranked family medicine were matched. This is a view of the first choice discipline for those CMGs matching to family medicine. 2023 had the lowest number of CMGs filling family medicine positions in first iteration for the past 5 years. We know, of course, there are many factors that influence decision-making and many discussions taking place on how to shift the demand trend for family medicine. It was not that long ago, 2015 in fact, when 38% of CMGs chose family medicine as first choice. Now it is under 31%. I want to show this view of second iteration results again. We know that second iteration introduces new factors, such as changes in eligibility, and of course, there is an opportunity for applicants and programs to reflect on the results of the first iteration when considering their approach in second. We will finish this section with a view of the unfilled family medicine positions at the end of the second iteration in each of the past years, broken down by region. Quebec in the green, Eastern region the orange, Western Canada in the burgundy, and Ontario in the blue. There were 65 in 2018, that's 1 year before we're showing on the slide, 33 in 2019, and now we're at 100 in 2023. Pretty consistent within Quebec in the last 3 years, with a fair bit of variation in Western region and Ontario over these last 3 years. It is worth noting here that there have been changes in some provinces over the past few years relating to combining or continuing to separate CMG and IMG streams in the second iteration, as I mentioned earlier. It's also important to note that 3 faculties with family medicine programs have initiated a post-match process, and you can find that information in the program description page at carms.ca. We hope this additional detail focused on family medicine is helpful. Know this data is only part of the story, and we would be happy to provide more detailed data on any aspect of this issue. Back to you, Ryan, for questions.
All right, thanks, John. Let me start with a question linked to your EDI data. Question wondering about statistics including mature students. Has CaRMS thought about producing any specific data about older graduates?
That's a great question, and one that we will absolutely bring back to the working group and see about the thoughts on that particular kind of data. Great question, thanks.
Does this data set allow us to look at the potential impact of the US match and the earlier timing of it on family medicine, regarding your point related to
there is some relevance there, and we do know that a number of applicants have indicated that the choice they had to make in pursuing either residency in Canada or US was complicated by the fact that the US match was earlier in the last few years. So we certainly hear that. We all have also heard it from programs who are mindful of lost opportunities with great applicants. So the timing of the US match is definitely a factor, and certainly that's a conversation that we are having with our colleagues at AFMC and learners. So that's certainly a relevant question, and thanks for that. It's certainly top of mind.
Perfect. This one is not necessarily captured in the data, but it's a question about the FM Proc exam that was introduced over the last 2 cohorts. Curious about the impact of the types and quantity of applications to family medicine after the introduction of this exam.
Gosh, I'm not as familiar with that as I might be. I don't know, Ryan. I don't mean to toss you in the wind here, but is this anything you have insight into? I know you're close to that.
Yeah, I was going to suggest we flip back to slide 40 for a second, just looking at the total unique applicants to family medicine. So when we look at that slide, you'll see that the number of unique applicants to family is relatively stable year over year and has not changed dramatically since the introduction of the FM Proc. Well, I suppose there's a slight reduction in the overall. I don't know if the exam itself is impacting application, but over the 2 years of it being in the match cycle, it doesn't appear to have an impact on the surface. Clarification question on slide 41, does the number of unmatched applicants represent not matching to family medicine or not matching to any program within the first iteration?
Not matching to any program in first iteration.
The number of unfilled family medicine positions at the end of the CaRMS matching process has raised concerns about the availability of physicians in Canada. Do you have any insights as to why there are so many unfilled positions in a climate where family physicians are needed?
I don't have a lot of insight into the whys. As I mentioned earlier, the positions in Quebec are it's a fairly fairly consistent number over the last 3 years. Certainly, as I mentioned earlier, the interest in the positions and the available applicant pool for the positions is a big factor. In Quebec, of course, we have the language factor, which is an important one, which certainly has a way of creating a particular pool that are eligible for those positions. So that's certainly one aspect. Beyond that, I think the demand for family medicine, as reflected in some of the earlier slides, is definitely a factor. And I will point to Western Region in Ontario, who over the course of the last few years have changed their approach to the second iteration, which it has some impact, and also where I mentioned earlier some of the innovations in certain jurisdictions where they identify even in first iteration that they want to create a more open applicant pool. So I think all of those things, and this is really in the context of the system itself, where eligibility and interest all align, and when they don't align, then you end up with, in this case, unfilled positions in this discipline.
Just a question through your lens on why there are so many unfilled positions in Quebec compared to other provinces across Canada.
As I mentioned, language is a factor. I do know, in speaking to our colleagues in Quebec, that there is lots of work going on in terms of how to attract and create the conditions in Quebec, that will bring in the applicants to fill those positions. Beyond the very simple language constraint, if you will, and it's a very important one and necessary one. Communication, for a family physician in particular, is a core thing in terms of that relationship with the patient. So beyond that, I really couldn't speak any more to it, I don't think.
All right, I think we're going to pause there for now, and back to you to continue the presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ryan. We'll now turn our attention to unmatched Canadian medical graduates. While it is true that the great majority of CMGs will match in the first iteration and many more in the second iteration, the outcome of unmatched CMGs is a topic of keen interest to many, and we have devoted significant effort to support better understanding. We showed in an earlier slide the ratio of available positions to the number of CMG participants, and that number is now 1.08. So 108 positions for every 100 Canadian medical graduates. So it is obvious that within those broad measures, there are many factors at play in terms of the interest in disciplines and locations from the CMG applicant perspective, and of course, the selection considerations for programs. We hope that what follows will shed light on some of those factors. So here we see at a high level data for two groups of CMG applicants. The blue line represents current year CMGs who are unmatched after both iterations, a sharp increase in 2023. The burgundy line reflects current year CMGs who do not match in first iteration and choose not to participate in second iteration. There has been an upward trend since 2014, with 2023 being the highest proportion at 2%. Since 2019, the number of unmatched CMGs in first iteration not participating in second is greater than the number of unmatched CMGs who participate in second. We will be focusing on first iteration to start. This is a view of unmatched Canadian medical graduates after first iteration, and we will look at this predominantly through a supply and demand lens. There were 194 unmatched Canadian medical graduates in first iteration. Of those, 160 had a first choice discipline with more demand than supply, and 34 with a first choice discipline of more supply than demand. Overall, 51% of CMGs had a first choice discipline with demand greater than supply. For the first iteration unmatched group, however, that is 83%. That's probably not shocking. However, it is important to recognize these basic elements of opportunity and interest that may misalign. Additionally, We separated those groups between those who applied to programs where there was at least one position available after first iteration, that's in the blue, or not, in the burgundy. For example, in the demand greater than supply group, 109 of 164 applied only to programs where there were no positions remaining in first iteration, after the first iteration. Going one step further, we will now see the number of disciplines ranked on this slide for CMG applicants with first choice discipline with more demand than supply. You can see on the left-hand side those applying to programs with no unfilled quota after first iteration. 69 of 109, or 63% of applicants, ranked only one discipline. Overall, I can tell you that 46% of CMGs ranked one discipline for the entire CMG applicant pool. You will appreciate that the combination of one ranked discipline, or even two disciplines, and that discipline or disciplines attracting more applicants ranking that discipline than there are positions available creates a situation where it is inevitable that there will be unmatched applicants. And it is possible that applicants are unmatched even if ranked. There are simply not enough positions available in that discipline. The possibility that applicants pursue relatively few locations, of course, compounds the challenge. For the group represented on the right, it is still the case that position availability versus combined applicant interest creates an imbalance. However, as there is at least one unfilled position, program preference may be a factor. All this being said, regardless of the data, we understand that being unmatched is a difficult situation for any applicant. These charts speak to first iteration unmatched CMGs with a first choice discipline of more supply than demand. Approximately 2/3 in both categories ranked one discipline. Again, overall, 46% of CMGs ranked one discipline. Here we have a much smaller group of applicants. Availability of positions is not the issue at the discipline level. However, limited choice of location can be a factor, for example, with the group on the left, where there are no unfilled positions. For further context, here are the match rates for CMGs ranking one discipline. Burgundy is all disciplines, 2014 to 2023. Contrasting match rates for family medicine as first choice discipline in the blue, and all high demand disciplines in the green. You can see that the overall match rate declined from 2014 for those ranking one discipline, with high demand disciplines driving that overall reduction. Remember from earlier, the increase of interest in high demand disciplines as first choice, creating more intense competition. In this slide, we look at applications to disciplines with supply greater than demand to see what differences emerge between matched and unmatched CMGs. Recall that in this group, there are 34 unmatched applicants. So what this slide does, it takes all of the applications, and for each one of the applications, how many of those applications attract an interview, and how many of those applications were mutually ranked between the applicant and the program, and then finally, the matched. Now the match percentage looks very small, but again, this is in the population of all applications. So in the case of a matched CMG with more supply than demand, you're probably looking at somewhere in the order of 40,000 applications. And in the case of the unmatched CMGs, smaller numbers clearly. And what you'll see here is that the funnel starts naturally with, of course, applications for each group. And then you will see that there is a significant difference in the percentage of interviews offered, 93.5% for matched applicants, 62.3% for the unmatched group, and then an even more significant difference in mutual ranks. Mutual ranking is, of course, essential for a match to occur. 72% of applications for matched applicants to disciplines with more supply than demand are mutually ranked, comparing to 10.9% for unmatched CMGs. Let's break that down one more level. Here we are looking at the ranking behavior of applicants and programs in the case of applications from unmatched CMGs with a first choice discipline of more supply than demand. We categorize the ranking combinations associated with all applications as either mutually not ranked, applicant ranks the program does not rank the applicant. Thirdly, the program ranks the applicant, but the applicant does not rank the program. And finally, mutually ranked. On this slide, we have two categories: mutually not ranked, which is the burgundy, and blue, which is the program ranks the applicant, but the applicant does not rank the program. Mutually not ranked has declined by approximately 11% in the last 8 years, while the percentage of applications where the program is interested and the applicant is not interested has risen 18% from 3% in 2015 to 21% in 2023. So, of the 34 unmatched applicants in this group, 21% or 7 applicants would have been matched but chose not to rank the program. The trend line for the percentage of applicant ranking and not programs is relatively flat, obviously with yearly variations. And the movement in that measure is largely mirrored by the instance of both sides being interested, i.e. mutually ranking. In the situation where there was a mutual ranking, for that particular program, there were no unfilled positions. Now, moving to the group with their first choice discipline being more demand than supply, 160 of the 194 unmatched in the first iteration are in this group. Availability of positions versus number of applicants is clearly a major factor here, with programs narrowing the funnel quickly, and that's for both matched and unmatched Canadian medical graduates. Interestingly, the percentage of mutual rankings shows less of a gap here between matched and unmatched versus the group of supply more than demand. For disciplines where demand exceeds supply, we again see a decline in the scenario where neither side is interested, approximately 16% from 38% in 2015 to 22% in 2023. In this case, however, it is an increase in the scenario of applicants interested and not programs that is increased, approximately 14% increase from 2015. Recall that for surgical and non-surgical disciplines overall, there are more applicants in relative terms to position availability over the 8-year period, as we saw in the supply and demand curves earlier. In many cases, programs will continue to interview and rank more or less the same number of applicants. So with more applicants, an increasing number will not be ranked. Here we see the mutual ranking scenario that did not result in a rank, consistently close to 20% over the past 10 years. Again, a direct result of positions being filled before that mutual rank is reached. In disciplines where demand is greater than supply, the instance of programs ranking and applicants not ranking is negligible. Of the 137 CMGs unmatched in first iteration and participating in second iteration, just under 55% changed their first choice discipline, 83 of the 137 matched in second iteration. As I mentioned earlier, the second iteration offers an opportunity for programs and applicants to reconsider their approach. Here's an answer to one of the earlier questions about the breakdown of the unmatched Canadian medical graduates after second iteration based on program ranking profiles. So you'll see here in the orange, not ranked by any programs, so 30 of the 54. 13 were ranked by some programs. 4 were ranked by all programs, but the programs filled before rank. And 7 could have matched, but did not rank the program. Let's circle back to the decision to participate or not in second iteration for current year CMGs. This is the 5-year view. As mentioned earlier, an increase in those choosing not to participate. We've explored this in the past, and we'll come back to that focus. The common thread, as mentioned in previous years, is the lack of opportunity in those applicants' first choice discipline going into second iteration. You will see here in the highlighted numbers, those not participating with no unfilled quota in their first choice discipline. Of the 56 in 2023, unmatched in first iteration and not participating in second, 40 or 71% had a first choice discipline with no positions available in that discipline going into second iteration. In 2022, that number was 76%. In 2021, 77%. These are not surprisingly all disciplines with more demand than supply. Should those applicants continue to pursue that same first choice in their next match year, that may have an impact on disciplines that already have more demand than supply. That could also explain in part the continued tightening in those high demand disciplines. So let's start with the first question. Do those CMGs in fact participate in the subsequent year? And the answer overwhelmingly is yes. For the 2022 group of 48, so again, 2022 being their initial match year, and the percentage reflecting the participation in the subsequent year for, so 2021 group participating in 2022 and so on. For the 2020 group of 48, 43 participated in this year's match. So consistently, the participation rate is 90% and above. The next question, given the data regarding unavailability of first choice discipline quota and the hypothesis of continued focus on the same first choice discipline in the subsequent match year, do they stay with the same first choice discipline? Here is the percent choosing the same first choice discipline as their initial match year. So this is the initial match year, and you'll see that the percentages remain at or above 70% in the last 3 years and just hovering around 70% for 2018 and 2019. So specifically for the 2022 group, of the 43 who participated, 32 ranked the same first choice discipline as in 2022. Finally, the question is, what percent actually matched to that first choice discipline? In summary, of the 43 who participated in 2022, 19 matched to the original first choice discipline. Out of the 36 who ranked that same discipline as first choice, 20 matched to a different discipline and 4 did not match. There are a few potential conclusions to be reached here, and I'll leave that to you to consider. When looking at CMG match rates, we always want to consider the long term. Here, we look at the ultimate success of the Canadian medical graduate in terms of obtaining a residency position through the application, selection, and match process. A process that intends to provide opportunity, choice, and optimum outcomes for learner and program participants. As we see here, CMG match rates are right around 99.5% for the past 8 years, above 99.5% for 2019, 2020, and 2021. Given the varying factors relating to available quota, discipline interest, and of course the impacts of a global pandemic, which we are still feeling in many ways, these outcomes would indicate a system that is capable of absorbing much change while retaining a high level of effectiveness. So, some takeaways. As we have seen, there are many ways of looking at the inputs, outcomes, decisions, and choices involved in the application, selection, and matching system. What we see is a system that is responsive to an increase in the number of positions available, as well as policy decisions and applicant interest. Outcomes are the direct result of the decisions made at all levels. Availability of positions, applicant and program interest, and preferences ultimately determine the results we see. Finally, the lens of supply and demand can help us with our understanding on many levels, particularly some of the thorniest challenges. I really do want to thank you for joining me in this overview, and now we'll turn it back to Ryan for more questions.
Perfect. Thanks, John. We're going to start with 2 questions that are related, both process clarification questions. So the first question is around, does it not affect the integrity of the match process when programs do not rank sufficient applicants? Has CaRMS considered requiring programs to rank all applicants who fulfill provincial eligibility criteria?
I'll refer back to my initial comments here, which is local autonomy is a key in this process, and that is reflective of both applicant and program choice, and coercing or forcing applicants or programs to choose an applicant or a program that they are not interested in for whatever reason is not in the interest of anybody really in the system. That safety, that ability to reflect your true preferences is really at the heart of the system. I certainly would be concerned about unintended consequences and perhaps known consequences of forcing programs or applicants to accept an outcome that they did not want.
Thanks. And the follow-up question, if you had a similar graph as slide 60, so the one that categorizes unmatched CMGs after second iteration, the question is really, if programs choose not to rank all applicants, it may become advantageous for candidates not to submit a rank order list with their true preference in the first iteration and instead gamble on the second iteration. So it's really a question around ranking strategy as to why would an applicant submit a first iteration rank list with their true preference and instead consider waiting until second.
Yeah, in my view, there is no situation where an applicant not indicating their true preferences would be an advantage to them, and that has been proven time and time again. That when an applicant indicates their true preference, they put themselves in the best position for that outcome they're looking for. And holding back or trying to think about what a program intends to do or what other applicants intend to do is not create an advantage in any way, shape, or form. So my advice, and the only advice I ever give applicants is two things. A, always indicate your true preferences, and that includes what you would include on your rank or list and what you would not, and eyes wide open. That whatever those choices are, you will need to accept the conclusions.
Circling back to an EDI link question, does the data show any correlation between household income of applicants as a proxy for socioeconomic status and match results? They wonder if there's a correlation between first choice discipline and number of programs ranked interviews.
That is exactly the kind of question we are hoping to provide data on in some subsequent cycles. As I mentioned earlier, last year's response rate was 19%, so not nearly enough to give us any confidence that any sort of linking of diversity data with other aspects of the process would give us any kind of credible data. 60%, we're getting there. Our data experts we're not quite there yet, but that kind of question and that kind of linkage is exactly what we're hoping to do.
Thanks, John. This may be a good opportunity to showcase the supplementary deck. There's a couple of questions related to supply and demand ratios presented for current year CMG applicants by individual specialty, something that has been presented in previous years.
Yeah, absolutely. The supplemental deck will have that information. I think there's about 45 slides, and I can tell you it's a bit of a heart-wrenching process or a head-wrenching process for us to decide what goes in this deck and what goes in the supplemental. So you will have access to that data, I can assure you.
This is related to slide 53. If supply is greater than demand and there is mutual ranking, why would there not be a match? How does a student go unmatched in this situation?
Again, in that case, you would have to get it down to the program level. What we were showing there was in the aggregate. So in the aggregate, all the applications were certainly, so some of the applications of those applicants would have been mutually ranked, but not all. And where they were mutually ranked, there were no positions available. So supply demand in this case being an aggregate view as opposed to a particular program view.
There were 54 unmatched CMGs after the second iteration this year compared to 35 in 2022. Why are there so many more unmatched CMGs this year?
In order to answer that question, we really would have to unpack the kind of thing we were just looking at. How many of those people were focusing on one discipline this year versus last year? Which disciplines were they focused on? What's the availability? You'd actually have to break it right down to the program level of application in general. And I think the data that we showed does illustrate this. It tends to be about misalignment of interest. And the demand and availability changes year over year, and demand changes year over year, not only in a general trend way at a discipline level, but also amongst schools, between schools, from home versus away. So there are all kinds of factors that are at play, and it's what I hope is that the data we provided here gives you some sense of the basic factors that are at play in those outcomes.
Process-related question again. More and more students don't go into second iteration because they spend a gap year in research or a master's program, hoping to improve their chances for the next application year. Are programs transparent enough on the points allowed or on the points associated with applicants who take a gap year when trying to apply a second time?
That's a great question. I have had a couple of inquiries after first iteration from some faculty colleagues expressing some concern around this issue. I am not personally aware of any specific signaling that occurs at a program level of what is expected or what is preferred. What we do know is we see, from the data that there is an increasing tendency for those who are applying to high demand disciplines where there isn't any availability of positions in second iteration to defer to the subsequent year. There may be a need to give that some serious thought from a policy perspective. Although I do circle back to the issue of choice and applicant choice being a really important fundamental principle here. So anything that is done by way of policy to limit or whatever that is, certainly I'm sure that will be given a lot of thought. But I can understand where the question comes from.
I've got a follow-up here for the question around the ranking strategy in first iteration. So really, it was an idea of, in this match year, if McGill Anesthesia had an unfilled position after first, and the applicant was interested in this position, would they not have been better off not backing up in the first iteration so they have the possibility of applying again in the second? And this goes to some of your comments around risky rank strategy and potentially clarifying how infrequent these situations come up.
They are infrequent, and we provide data to all participants, so to give a really good picture of all the different situations that can emerge. And hindsight, to not be glib, hindsight is 20/20. So if we knew then what we know now, then we might have changed things, but that's never the case. And I go back to my comment of eyes wide open, and applicants I've spoken to many applicants, and they think long and hard about these choices, and that the outcomes in the first iteration, 93 and then some percent matched, and then at the end of the second iteration, fixed in the year. So applicants know that there are all sorts of factors at play, and it does come down to an individual choice. And these are folks' career and their lives, and they are the ones who are making the choices and living with them. So, if we can give them data to help with that choice, that's great. But it does come down to an individual choice. And regrettably, the future is not clear in many situations.
Perfect. Thanks, John. Here's a question about greater attention being given to unmatched IMGs.
Will there be attention? That's a great question, and we have shown some data the last couple of years around IMGs, and then when we look at family medicine, of course, we are exploring a very particular group, and we know that 88% this year, for example, of IMGs who were participating in the match were focused on family medicine, and we did see the matched unmatched in there, so that we get a glimpse there. I do very much take the question at heart, and we will be turning our attention to more of an exploration, and some of that view of that discipline interest and some of the factors at play for IMGs. We will explore that further in the future. Thanks for that question.
Thanks, John. This one is referencing slide 49. Why do students apply again to the same school with no seats left for their match of choice? So it really is a question around clarification. Are they applying to a different discipline, or are they unaware that the seats that they applied to in first iteration at that school are filled at the point of second iteration application? The question really is around, why would an applicant apply to the same school again? And I think there may have just been some lack of clarity on that they're not necessarily applying to the same discipline in each of these instances.
Absolutely, and so they're applying to a different discipline. In this case, 55% are applying to a different discipline in the second iteration. They may be applying to the same school. They may be applying to a different school. It's hard. We don't have that data here right in front of us, but certainly applying to a program. Well, in fact, applicants cannot apply to programs that have no positions available in second iteration because there's nothing to apply to. So I'm not entirely sure if I'm getting the question. That's probably being a little bit thick.
No, I think that's a fair interpretation.
If they apply to the same school, they must be applying to a different discipline. If that school they applied to in their first instance in that discipline has no seats left, it must be a different discipline.
Another question now, independent of the third iteration, is there a mechanism to ensure that applicants who rank family medicine as a first choice are not left unmatched, we'll say at the conclusion of the process?
No, there's no assurance. However, as I mentioned, there is a post-match process. And I mentioned that there are 3 faculties who are involved in that process now. So folks who are interested in those positions can certainly apply directly to those programs. CaRMS is not involved in it. We simply facilitate it by way of information about what's available. So that post-batch process is the way.
We've got a question here. Do you have any statistics on how many applicants who did not match in first iteration ultimately apply to a different program for second iteration? And if accepted, apply to transfer out of that program in a subsequent match year?
We don't have that data at my fingertips. We certainly could. We certainly could produce that, and that's a fairly tight use case. But that is data we would have, and we can explore that.
Yeah, and I think we would add the caveat to that we could only report on applicants who use the CaRMS match process to transfer out of the program for the second year. Often transfers are facilitated outside of our service. So there would be a limitation in what we could produce. Yeah,
great clarification, Ryan. Thanks for that.
Good question. After showing all these data for Unmatched CMG, what are the take-home messages or advice for Unmatched CMGs?
I think the take-home messages are, once again, eyes wide open. Your true preferences are your preferences, and I know there's much thought goes into those. And that folks will accept the outcomes, and that does not mean that it's not hard. It is hard, and we are here to help folks with their success. And when that doesn't happen, that's hard. Advice, again, eyes wide open. That's my only advice. And draw on your. So here's a bit of advice, and it's really advice that'll come from others. I had the really good experience and fortune to participate in a session sponsored by Dr. Sarita Verma at NOSM back in January, and I'm quite sure that session is on YouTube. There were some terrific perspectives of those who have been through this process, including a woman who was unmatched, and then the journey that she had and coming back to the subsequent year. So I think of the advice of others is where you're going to, I think, benefit most rather than mine in this case. So again, NOSM University, YouTube, January of this year, and Dr. Verma was a very powerful and gracious host of that, and got a lot of great people involved in the conversation.
In slide 21, I understand that CMGs in Quebec match less than their first choice compared to other CMGs across Canada. So basically just looking to affirm their understanding of slide 21.
Let me just, I think the answer to that question is yes. I'm just going by memory here. I believe the answer to the question is yes.
Perfect. Does CaRMS have or plan to produce any data around IMGs who are unmatched, even though they are selected, so ranked by at least one program?
That's a good data point. So this is all being recorded. We'll capture that, and we'll take that away.
Another question around the number of unmatched this year. Really looking if there is any sort of conclusionary statements we have around the increase in unmatched or decrease in matched applicants this year? I assume this is through the CMG lens, seeing as the IMG match numbers were significantly increased this year.
Yeah, really nothing to add from my earlier comments. The match rate, I guess what I would probably come back to is what occurs over a couple of match cycles, and the unmatched situation, as we have seen in prior years, it's always hard for unmatched applicants, and that's CMGs and IMGs. So nothing further to add really, other than that the journey for the next year is an important one, and drawing on resources and really understanding where the opportunities are. That's going to be key. And again, I know a lot of resources out there for folks to draw on. So my confidence level is high that folks will be successful in the long term.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And while you're in the neighborhood of slide 21, we've got a clarification question about slide 23. On slide 23, it's talking about second iterations positions filled, showing over 100 IMGs matched in second iteration. However, if you look at the CaRMS website, there was only one IMG position available for second iteration. Can you explain the discrepancy? So maybe a question around or clarification around how eligibility changes in second iteration.
Yeah, great. That's a great clarification. So in fact, and I mentioned this earlier, in many provinces, what positions that were either CMG specific or IMG specific in the first iteration become available to both cohorts in the second iteration. And that is the biggest factor in the availability of these positions, and in this case for IMG. So the unfilled positions in first iteration in many cases were CMG eligibility, and in second iteration that would have changed, and therefore IMGs would have been eligible and were successful.
This may be a good opportunity for some clarification of CaRMS' role in the match process. Will CaRMS advocate for unmatched applicants?
CaRMS is not an advocate. In fact, the independence of CaRMS is at the core of our role. We stand for the success of all participants, and we do not have a stake in any particular outcome or the success of one group versus the other. We're here to make the system as simple as we can, make the process known and easy to follow, and give with lots of customer protections to make sure folks don't miss things, but we do not advocate for one particular outcome or another.
Perfect, thank you.
Other than making data available, which we hope provides some power information to help with that.
For slides 62 and 63, could you just clarify what the first three columns mean?
So the first column is the number of CMGs matching in second iteration with this discipline as their first choice. The second column is the those who participated in second iteration and did not match in their first choice in the first iteration. And then these are the CMGs who did not participate in second iteration, unmatched in first, and their first choice discipline.
We're going to have one more question, and then we're going to wrap up, seeing as we're so close to time. I believe this may be an opportunity to showcase slide 67, just for clarification. Is there a slide showing the path of unmatched CMGs in future matches? One chart that shows the progress individuals through multiple matches.
There, we did do that in the past. It was a fairly complicated view, and where we landed, and this was based on feedback, was back to this aggregate view of what occurred with the various cohorts of unmatched. And so what you have here at the bottom are the number of unmatched from each one of these initial match years, and then what we call here the unknown journey. And unknown journey simply for us is they have not participated in matches subsequent to that time, and so they may be doing other things. So we did do something at a much more granular level in the past. Not seen to be terribly helpful, simply because every pathway was like one or two people, and it wasn't seen to be all that helpful. This one seemed to be the one that gave folks the most information at the system level. But we've got the question, and we'll take it away. And if there's anything we think we can add that'll be helpful, we'll have a look at that.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And before I hand it over to you for final statements, thank you to everyone for attending. Everyone who has registered for the event will get a link to the data deck from today. In addition, for those who are looking for the supplementary data, our plan is to post it sometime in the next month, but you will be contacted when it has been posted with a link to the supplementary deck also. So over to you, John.
Thanks, Ryan. So first off, thanks to you for your outstanding moderation and navigating the questions and helping me interpret them. So thanks for that. Thanks to all the folks who attended. Really terrific. The number of attendees this year was quite high, and we're thankful for that. And we hope that this presentation has been helpful to you. We are here, and that's as an organization and as individuals, reach out to us with anything that you think will be helpful to you. And finally, I want to thank the CaRMS team. I will not name names which might embarrass them, but I can tell you that they have my undying gratitude for helping us get to where we are today and to make all this information available to you. So thanks, folks. Take care and have a wonderful day. Bye for now.